Hey y'all, happy Tuesday. So, this is going to be kind of a different stream than I had intended for today, and I'm outside, so of course you're hearing planes. But this is something that's been weighing heavily on me all day today, and I want to talk about it. So, please, if you cannot handle adult conversations, stay out of this chat for this one because this is a real conversation. Hey, y'all. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day so far. We are going to talk about a case that is going on in Missouri. Marcellus Williams is set to be executed at 6 p.m. tonight. And it's something that's been weighing heavily on me for the last couple days. I've been reading and watching all of the stuff that I could. The Innocence Project picked up his case a few years back and has been advocating for him. And this isn't your typical death row inmate situation. Like, there is a lot of questions surrounding this. So this isn't a conversation of whether you're pro death penalty, anything like that. So please keep those opinions to yourself. I'm going to play you a couple videos to catch some people up to speed who are not aware of what is going on. And then we're going to talk a little bit further into this. Again, you're entitled to have your feelings on whether you support the death penalty or not. This isn't what we're talking about. Unfortunately, in the United States, we still execute a lot of innocent people. And that is a reality. And that is why things like the Innocence Project exist. And that is why there's so much broken in our judicial system. And seeing people, when I end this today, I'm going to give a little rant, because me and my huge ego over here that advocates and speaks about things that are important to me don't just talk about it. I live that life. This is an important topic that should be discussed, and more people should be aware of what is actually going on. And that's why I don't pretend to sit by people on this app or condone things on this app that I wouldn't be okay with in my real life. This isn't a game. These are people's real lives that we talk about. These are real victims at the end of the day. Somebody lost their life in this story, and those victims and their families matter. But there's also a human life that is set to be put to death. And there is a ton of questions around this story. And in my opinion, well, let's play some of the clips. There's actually a podcast that it's a 2-part series that I'm going to link for you guys below that goes into detail of a little bit more of speaking with Marcellus, so you can hear his story. I'll do that when I'm done here. We're going to start with CNN. This is from today.
The execution of a Missouri death row inmate is set to go ahead today after the state Supreme Court and the state's governor both rejected pleas to stop the procedure, despite prosecutors saying he may be innocent.
The prosecutor Y'all caught that right? The prosecutor who prosecuted Marcellus is saying he might be innocent. You caught that?
55-year-old Marcellus Williams is scheduled to be executed later today by lethal injection for the 1998 stabbing death of Lisha Gale Williams, and has maintained his innocence in the case. Or rather, Williams has maintained his innocence in the case. Attorneys for Williams still have an appeal out to the U.S. Supreme Court, though. So joining us now to discuss this is CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Roiphe. Rebecca, good morning. So this execution has actually been sort of pushed along kind of several times. Help us understand, though, what the arguments were from Marcellus's attorney, what they brought forward, and why this time around the Supreme Court was not swayed.
There were two arguments, Anne-Marie, that the lawyers made this time. The first one was that Marcellus did not receive a fair trial because the prosecutors wrongfully excluded a juror based on that juror's race. The second argument was that the prosecutors destroyed the only evidence that could possibly exculpate Marcellus in this case. And so those two arguments failed in the Missouri Supreme Court. What's left now is just one last chance with the U.S. Supreme Court.
I found it interesting sort of reading some of what the justices had to say, and some of their phrasing, maybe you can explain to me, but it was essentially, I see nothing here that would prove his innocence, which I thought was an interesting way to phrase it, because I thought it would be, I see nothing here that would, I don't know, somehow I thought that the phrasing would be different, but I guess at this point, the conclusion of the court is that he is guilty and you need evidence to prove otherwise.
Right. I mean, once somebody has been convicted, the jurors have decided, 12 jurors have decided that he's guilty of this crime, then, that presumption that we normally have that people are innocent shifts. That said, the idea that we might execute somebody who is potentially innocent is itself troubling. And I think that's what you're picking up on, the idea that there might be one possibility. And especially in a case like this, where there is, significant evidence that prosecutors themselves contributed to the loss of the only evidence that could exculpate this defendant, it's troubling. And that those prosecutors themselves have joined with the defendant's lawyers in an attempt to stay the execution is remarkable, and something that should give the courts pause here, I think, but have not.
Really quickly, any other options for him?
Well, he has one last option with the U.S. Supreme Court. He's asked for a stay of his execution based on that argument, the constitutional argument that the juror was wrongfully excluded due to race. We have not yet heard from the Supreme Court. He is scheduled to be executed, as you said, later today. So, we're waiting that last minute, the response to that last minute petition.
We're within an hour and 15 minutes of this scheduled execution. And the prosecutors themselves have joined his attorneys. I'm going to go a little bit farther. The governor denied granting a stay yesterday. Governor Parsons denied. I don't know if he'll come back and do something different today. Doesn't really sound like I don't have much faith in that. So I'm going to read you one of the Washington Post articles. I really highly encourage you. We're not going to do a deep dive, but I really wanted to bring some attention to this in my community here, because this is a big deal. This is a huge situation. This was a horrific crime in 1998. But there was so many things wrong initially with how evidence was found. The crime scene itself, there was bloody footprints. The shoe size is not of Marcellus's. There was DNA evidence that they found later. The evidence was only found in Marcellus's possession after a $10,000 reward was offered. There are so many situations that are transpiring around this case that we in the United States, if there's any doubt that this man could be innocent, this shouldn't even be a situation that we are seeing, but we are. And unfortunately, many innocent people have lost their lives. So let's read further. Prosecutors say evidence clears him. He's set to be executed today. This is from the Washington Post. This is Marcellus Williams on your screen. Marcellus Williams has spent more than 2 decades in Missouri's death row fighting his execution for a murder he says he did not commit. And I want to remind everybody, too, it might say some in this article. I can't remember. I've read so much today on this. It's just wild. But he is always denied this crime. He has always said he is innocent. That has never changed. He has never taken accountability whatsoever. Yes, he had a previous rap sheet. However, in Missouri, there are 17 categories that can place you, or somebody can fall into the death penalty category. He didn't fall into any of those categories initially, but because of one of the subcategory, I guess, I don't even know how they did this, of him having multiple assaults, violent assaults, they were able to give him the death penalty. There's been a lot of really interesting things with this case that's very, very in-depth. The Innocence Project, again, over 1 million people have signed a petition behind this. Over 1 million people. Like, this isn't a little deal. Okay. Let's continue to go. On Tuesday, Williams, 55, is scheduled for a repeatedly delayed execution that has raised alarms related to DNA evidence and questions of fairness from his 2001 trial. I just got a message from Ahmad. After 2 last-minute execution reprieves starting almost a decade ago, momentum to re-examine Williams' decades-old conviction has gathered from unlikely sources, including the local prosecutor from the office that convicted him. Williams has since received an outpouring of support from legal groups like the Midwest Innocence Project and a member of Congress. The family of the victim in 1998 St. Louis stabbing now opposes Williams' execution. That needs to be really taken into account. The family of the victim in the 1998 St. Louis stabbing now opposes Williams' execution. The victim's family does not want this man executed. That should weigh heavily, but it doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Why is Marcellus Williams on death row? On August 11th, 1998, Felicia Gale, a former reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, was found stabbed to death in her suburban St. Louis home. Though forensic evidence at the crime scene included fingerprints. Okay, now listen to this, because this is, y'all, my brain's scattered, sorry. Though forensic evidence at the crime scene included fingerprints, footprints, hair, which was pubic hair, and DNA on a kitchen knife, the investigation stretched on for more than a year without an arrest. Williams, who has denied killing Gale, was eventually convicted of her murder despite his DNA not matching the forensic evidence recovered from the crime scene. His current attorneys say that his conviction was built upon testimony from 2 unreliable witnesses who had incentives to point the finger at Williams, reward money, and a bargain for shorter sentences in their own criminal cases. One of those witnesses had been a previous witness against him in another case. The Midwest Innocence Project, which has taken up Williams' case, said the incentives of the witnesses in this case are particularly problematic. Jailhouse informant testimony played a role in 23% of death penalty exoneration cases, according to data from the National Registry of Exonerations from the University of Michigan. Williams was twice spared from execution, first by the state Supreme Court in 2015 and in 2017 when Governor Eric Gretchens granted Williams a reprieve. Persuaded by arguments that new DNA testing exonerated Williams, Gretchens appointed a board of inquiry to investigate the new claims. The board was abruptly disbanded in 2023 by Gretchens' predecessor, Governor Mike Parson, before it issued a final report. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey set a 2024 execution for Williams. Parsons said last year that it was time to move forward with the execution. We could stall and delay for another 6 years, deferring justice, leaving a victim's family in limbo, and solving nothing. Parsons said in a news release last year, this administration won't do that. Williams sued Parsons in August 2023 for dissolving the board before it could issue a report, but the state Supreme Court dismissed Williams' claim, clearing the way for the execution. Meanwhile, St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney Wesley Bell learned of the new DNA testing that he says could exonerate Williams. But hours before an evidentiary hearing on the evidence, Bell and Williams' team learned that the DNA that excluded Williams belonged to former St. Louis prosecutor Keith Lanier and an investigator whose years earlier contaminated the murder weapon by handling it without gloves, according to court filings. You get that? The evidence was contaminated. It does. Petty as fuck. This one hurts my heart too. This one hurts my heart too. The evidence was contaminated. Yeah. Please go look into this case if you don't know about it. Hold on. Let me give Dexter treats right quick so I can continue reading this one. This one just has shook me to my core. Like this case in itself, like I try not to pay attention to some of these because a lot of them bother me. But this one in particular just really has me. I just don't. Well, I wouldn't say the former DA did it. That's not. So there was another murder. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Okay. He's happy now. There was actually another murder that the medical examiner in the same, not far from where this one happened, of another female who stabbed with her own kitchen knife. The knife was left similarly to this horrific incident. The medical examiner thought they potentially could be even linked, and nothing was ever looked into. Okay, hold on. Let's get back to this. Okay. Bell's office then sought to spare Williams the death penalty with an Alford plea, which would allow Williams to plead guilty without admitting to the crime to accept a plea bargain, resulting in life in prison. The state Supreme Court in Bailey blocked the deal. This month, Williams' attorneys argued before St. Louis County Circuit Court judge that the prosecution's mishandling of evidence years ago destroyed Williams' last and best chance to prove his innocence. Attorney Jonathan Pott said, according to the Associated Press, the circuit court judge declined to vacate Williams' conviction and death sentence. Parsons rejected Williams' clemency request, while the state Supreme Court on Monday rejected his request to pause his execution so a lower court could determine whether prosecutors wrongly excluded Black potential jurors at his criminal trial. Lawmakers, including Representative Cori Bush, have urged the state to stop Williams' execution. Williams is scheduled to be executed tonight, about 70 miles southwest of St. Louis. Now I'm going to take you here. Give me 1 second. Let me go over here. I want to share this podcast with you. We're going to watch a little bit of it. I don't know if this is a new channel, it's a small channel, but the videos are incredible. It's called 1 Minute. Let me grab you the link to this channel, please. Oh, I haven't even subbed up. Hold on. Let me go sub up because whoever's channel this is, it seems like a newer channel, but they have incredible content on there. Very important. He actually called and spoke to Marcellus on the phone, and I want you to hear some of this. But then there's a part 2, so I want you to go listen to that.
Of local was handed a death.
Hold on.
Of Missouri has 3 months to live. Marcellus Williams was handed a death sentence over 2 decades ago for the 1998 killing of local newspaper reporter Felicia Gale. It's a crime he not only says he didn't commit, but one that a number of independent experts say DNA evidence proves he's innocent of. The execution of criminals has been used by nearly all societies since the beginning of civilization on Earth. However, the practice has since been abolished in all but 52 countries around the world, with the United States being the only Western nation still to use it. However, of course, a number of...
There's the link in the chat. Please go sub up if you're interested in this kind of content. I will get to a little bit in this so you can hear some of the call with Marcellus. It's very important. These are very important conversations that need to be had. People need to be aware of what is going on because unfortunately there's other innocent people on death row.
Of states around the United States have abolished its use. The first being Michigan, all the way back in 1847, followed by Wisconsin, Maine, and Rhode Island, with many more following suit. However, to date, 27 states still have capital punishment. And there are reports that there are around 2,262 men and women currently incarcerated on death row across the country. One of those states in which the death penalty is still widely used is the state of Missouri. In the past decade, the state has carried out 23 executions. It's the fourth highest number in the country. They, in fact, put to death a man in April by the name of Brian Dorsey, a man who had a petition signed by over 70 correctional officers asking for his sentence to be reduced to life without parole.
Oh.
And possibly even more sobering was when I asked Marcellus if there was anyone else on the row waiting on a date. Where you are housed now at the moment, are you by yourself or is there other people waiting on dates for execution?
Yeah, it's a guy next door. He got a date for next Tuesday.
Oh,
He's
shit.
supposed to be actual next Tuesday. His name is Dave Hauser. I'm surprised you ain't heard of him. He has an actual execution date for Tuesday. But me and him, we the only ones right now with dates, actual dates.
The threat of death is nothing new for the man who spent over 2 decades in prison trying to fight his conviction. And just a few weeks ago, the Missouri Supreme Court scheduled Marcellus to be executed on September the 24th at 6 p.m.
We are within an hour. Within an hour of this man potentially being executed. I want you to take that into account. I want you to take into account that the victim's family doesn't want this.
It's in fact the 3rd time he's been given a date and only narrowly escaped death the last time.
The Missouri governor issued a last-minute stay of execution for death row prisoner Marcellus Williams, only hours before he was slated to be put to death Tuesday night.
I first came across Marcellus's story when I saw a post that had been made by the Innocence Project, who, along with a number of other attorneys, has been fighting his case for some time. After seeing his story, I wanted to reach out to see if I could speak with him. I wasn't keen on my chances as I'd attempted to speak with others on death row before with no joy. Their sentence is usually carried out different to general population. They are confined to their cells in a form of solitary confinement with strict access to communication. Nonetheless,
Missouri's Eastern time, right? I think Missouri's Eastern time.
I tracked down Marcellus and sent him a message. He replied telling me he in fact had 24/7 access to a phone, seemingly a privilege offered to those who have been given their date. So as always...
Thank you, Steph Central. Okay, so 2 hours. We're within 2 hours. Sorry about that. Thank you, guys.
Before we get to why and
So we're within 2 hours. Okay, we're 2 hours out. Thank you.
how, first, we start with the who.
No matter what, we're way too close. Way too close for all of the situation that is in this case to be that close.
Who is Marcellus Williams. Did you grow up in Missouri? Was that where you were born and raised?
I grew up in Missouri, but I was born in South Bend, Indiana. And when I was little, my mother was going back and forth from South Bend, Indiana to St. Louis, and then she decided to firmly stay in St. Louis when I was about...
Missouri. This is in Missouri. He's been in for over 2 decades. He was convicted in 2001 of this.
Oh, probably in the 2nd grade, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. So I've been in St. Louis since about the 2nd grade permanently, you know what I mean? So yeah, I actually grew up in St. Louis, yeah.
Right.
But a lot of my relatives still, they in South Bend, Indiana.
And do you come from a big family?
You know, my mother had 4 boys. I'm the 3rd boy that my mother had, so I didn't grow up with any sisters other than my cousin, my female cousin. She was the only girl, you know, around us for many, many, many years until she had a little brother, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, so, you know, my family was close.
So yesterday, the governor refused to grant a stay. There is the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. They're waiting. They might not hear anything, but that's the final. That's all there is. I was trying to find if they could step in, and it doesn't seem that they, I don't know if they can go over this. Like it really is a sticky situation.
You know, we grew up under...
I'm going to drop the Innocence Project link for you guys, just so you guys can follow that if you would like to. But unfortunately, it's just, Parsons said no. In fact, his statements that he's made are pretty, in my opinion, gross. But
my grandparents, at one point, that, you know, we all stayed in the same house. My grandparents and a lot of my uncles and aunties, and, you know, until my mother ended up with her own house, you know, so about the time I was going to the 5th grade. So yeah, we got a pretty big family, yeah.
Happy childhood?
I guess a childhood that's expected, you know, growing up with, you know, with the challenges of, I guess, poverty. But yeah. I say poverty because we didn't have a lot, but I can never say that I can never remember a time that I actually went hungry. You know what I'm saying? Happy in the sense that a child doesn't understand, you know, the stresses that life really brings. You know what I mean? So, yeah, when you say happy childhood, hindsight looking at it, yeah, I would say, even though, you know, like I say, we had different challenges economically, you know.
He says that all in all, school life for him was relatively easy.
Again, just so you guys know, I dropped the Innocence Project for his case above, but I'm also going to continue to drop this channel, the 1 minute remaining. There are so many stories of inmates that he has talked to, Dexter, that he has spoken to, and I highly encourage you guys to go sub up. Amazing channel. Great stories, very realistic stories that need to be heard. Please go sub up, give them some love, because there's a part 2 of this. We're not going to get through all of it. I want you guys to go watch this channel and get the views on that channel, because incredible deep dives.
Although he seemed to breeze through certain subjects, he really didn't apply himself. He never gave much weight to education or took it seriously, and says that he spent too much time rebelling and pushing back. What do you think you were rebelling against?
I don't know. You know what I'm saying? My father wasn't in my life, so even though I had my grandfather as my, you know, the man role model, you know what I'm saying, taking care of his family and working a job and things like that.
Running Bear, yes, he's claimed innocence from day one. He has never, ever said he was anything but innocent of this crime.
My uncles up to a point, but I don't know. Maybe that played a role in it. Looking back on it, I can't really explain it because, you know, you're a child. You just, I don't know, just lashing out, I guess. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's just one of those things, you know, fall in place, you know.
A rebellious Marcel makes his way through school, getting himself.
Remy, I have read, now I could be misinformed, so please take this with a grain of salt. This gets a little tricky and above my knowledge. But from the research I did, they can completely ignore it and not give an answer at all. The U.S. Supreme Court.
Into trouble with teachers here and there, but it never really went much further. However, he says that come his teenage years, growing up in the streets of St. Louis, it wasn't long until he found the trouble he was getting in would make its way out of the classroom.
Yeah, teenage years, you know what I'm saying, that's a little bit, the streets of St. Louis is kind of rough. So,
Yeah.
You start focusing in on, want to have finances, want to have vehicles, want to have, the latest this, the latest that, you know what I'm saying, and keeping with the, the status quo or the cultural norms, you know what I'm saying, especially dealing with your peers. So, you out there and you don't have a job, so you out there doing whatever you do in the streets,
Marcellus makes no claims that he was some form of choir boy in his younger years and would make many a poor decision in life. That would, in fact, find him incarcerated for the first time at just 18 years old. Yeah, I mean, I was speaking with actually Christopher Dunn, who also grew up in St. Louis. He was telling me that it was a very tough place to grow up. There was a lot of gangs around and that sort of stuff. Did you ever gravitate towards the gang situation?
No, the guys I grew up with, wasn't no gangs. We just was cool with each other. You know what I'm saying? We had, your friends, your peers, but the gangs came later on. Once I ended up going to prison, I went to prison when I was 18 years old.
Right.
And then when I got out at 90, I went to prison at the beginning of 88 and got out like late part of 89, I'll say, yeah.
Right.
Then the gangs like the Crips and Bloods from California, they came in, but I never partook in anything like that.
Do you mind me asking what your first prison sentence was in relation to?
My first prison sentence had something to do with stealing a car or being not really, I wasn't charged with stealing the car. I was charged with what they call tampering. Yeah, that's what they call it, tampering with a motor vehicle. And also assault on a police officer. They said that me and my partner, we shot at the police, but that was to justify the police shooting my friend. You know what I mean? I ended up going to prison for that in a burglary case.
So, I mean, what was your first prison experience like? Was it a terrifying thing for a young? Because I mean, at 18, you're still pretty young.
No, I wouldn't say it was terrifying because it's just like you go through from the streets to juvenile detention centers, and some of the same people you see in the streets and juvenile you see in prison, even though many, many, many new faces, of course.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the end of this so you can start hearing about the case that has actually landed him on death row. And then if you would like to go back, I'm going to continue to drop this and hear about his backstory, his time in prison, things of that nature. Feel free to please go watch, sub up to this channel. Again, incredible stories. But I want to talk about what's happening right now.
Miss Azario, who had she testified against you in a different case?
Okay, hold on. I skipped forward too fast. Okay.
Stated that Felicia had sustained over 40.
Actually, I want you guys to hear about this crime. Now, trigger warning, this is very raw. Okay, hold on.
So when did you first hear about this allegation of the murder of Miss Gale?
That was like about almost a year. I'm going to say about close to a year. Okay. I had been locked up already, yeah. Then some detectives came while I was locked up, penning the robbery case, going back and forth to court on that, tried to talk to me about it, but I had refused to talk to them, and once they told me the charges, I was like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is very serious charges. And they was like, yeah. I said, yeah, I need to have my attorney, you know what I'm saying, present or whatever. So I never did have it actually be questioned by him,
And were you using just a public defender at the time?
Always. I always only had a public defender. I didn't have any, finances. Yeah. So I always had to use the state's, public defender. Yeah.
Felicia Gale was born and grew up in Rockford, Illinois. She had graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in journalism and would make her way into that particular career. In 1981, she was working as a reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, where she stayed until 1992. She would leave the newspaper to pursue more philanthropy and volunteer work. In 1998, Felicia Gale lived with her husband, Dr. Daniel Pikus, in a home in University City. It is a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. They had known each other since childhood and
Trigger warning, please. They are going to go into specifics of this crime.
Rockford, and he was working as a radiologist at Barnes Jewish Hospital. On August 11th, 1998, 42-year-old Felicia Gale was at home when someone broke in. The offender would take a butcher's knife from the kitchen and stab her 16 times. Her husband Daniel would be the one who sadly would come home and find the horrific scene. And Felicia still had the knife used to kill her lodged in her neck. Detectives would discover that her purse, a jacket, and her husband's laptop were missing, along with some other minor items from the home. The crime scene itself appeared at the time to be quite the treasure trove of potential evidence. There were bloody footprints through the scene that didn't match the victim, her husband, or any of the first responders. Bloody fingerprints were found on areas of the walls, as well as hair samples, some of which were pubic hairs, found on Felicia and on a recently vacuumed rug. Not only that, but of course, they had the murder weapon. The autopsy report later stated that Felicia had sustained over 40 injuries from the knife, 16 stab wounds, and the most notable being to her neck, where the knife had been left. It was noted that this murder seemed eerily similar to one that had been committed just a month prior, around 3 miles away, where a woman was also stabbed and killed at her home with a knife from her own kitchen. That knife had also been left in her neck. They seemed so similar that the medical examiner went as far as to say she believed that these two cases could be related. The police seemingly had an abundance of leads to follow. However, 10 months later, with little to no breakthroughs on the case, Felicia's husband would put up $10,000 of his own money as a reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction in the case. It was just after this reward had been offered that police were contacted by 2 people who said they had information on the case. The first being Henry Cole.
Pay attention. These are the 2 witnesses. After a $10,000 reward was offered, these 2 came forward.
Who would tell police that Marcellus confessed to him in prison in 1998 while the pair were serving time together. Did you know Mr. Cole?
I didn't know him until, when we was locked up together in if you can picture like the workhouse, it's like a big bay, like an area with like lots of different beds. It's no rooms or no divider, but it's like you have bunks.
Yep.
Beds going down the road like that. It was like in big open space, like that. So yeah. If you ever seen any pictures of the workhouse, we was in the workhouse together. I just knew him through one of my cousins. He's the uncle of one of my cousins.
Right, okay. And so...
But I didn't know him until then.
Was it the detectives that told you that they had a witness against you?
No.
Right now, unfortunately, Mom of a Gladiator, if you're the praying type, pray. If you believe in energy, all of that positive vibe, that's all we can do. The United States Supreme Court is the last hope. The governor denied a stay. The Missouri Supreme Court denied. And we are within 2 hours of this man's execution. And you'll hear more upcoming of why this is horrifying.
Henry Cole was a career criminal and had convictions that stretched back decades. As soon as he was released from prison, he immediately goes to police to tell them what he supposedly knew about the crime. He tells the police that while in prison together, he and Marcellus were watching TV when a news report came on about the murder. He says Marcellus bragged to him that he had been the one to commit the murder and get away with it. He says that over the coming days, Marcellus would continue to talk about the crime, giving him more and more details which Henry Cole says that he had written down on a piece of paper, which he hands to the police officers. There was many issues with Mr. Cole's accounts of what he'd been told by Marcellus Williams. One of the biggest and oddest ones was that apparently Marcellus had told Henry Cole that he'd worn gloves during the attack. However, you may recall from the crime scene itself, there was multiple bloody fingerprints found all over the scene. So if Marcellus Williams was wearing gloves during the crime, how on earth would he leave fingerprints everywhere? The second witness was the one we mentioned briefly a moment ago. She's a former girlfriend of Marcellus's, Lara Azario. Miss Azario, who had she testified against you in a different case?
Right, that's the case I'm talking about. In the robbery case, they used her, and they wanted to get this robbery on me so they can have aggravators for the murder case to make sure you can get the death penalty if you have certain assaultive aggravators. So they had to find me guilty for that robbery. They made sure they died in Brentwood, St. Louis County. So
That's how they got him to fit into one of the 17 categories, was because of aggravated circumstances.
they used her to say that one of the three guys who had on ski masks, all three of these guys had on ski masks and gloves. They used her to say that one of these guys was me. But this actual restaurant, two of the guys, they actually knew me, and they actually came to court and said that they didn't believe it was me. And the detectives tried to get them to say that, just say that you know him, show them a picture of me, and say, just sign here to say that you just know Marcellus Williams. So they signed it, but when they got to trial, the prosecutor was like, but didn't you sign this picture saying that he was the one? They was like, no, I didn't sign that picture saying he was the one. I signed the picture because the detective saying that, sign this here saying that you know him.
This is in Missouri. This man, Marcellus Williams, is set to be executed within the next 2 hours.
You know what I'm saying? Which they did know me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But one of them even said, I'm not going to send an innocent man to jail. But they was like, no, I didn't say that it was him. I don't believe it was him. You know, but they still used this Laura Cerro to say that this video, three guys, all of them got on ski masks, gloves and everything. One of them is me, you know, and this is how I got convicted of this case. You know, this robbery case. So they used her in that case.
She's apparently identified you even though all the guys were wearing ski masks.
Right. Every single person has a ski mask on and gloves. But they used her to say that this one guy in the video is me. So they used that, found me guilty. Somehow the jury found me guilty. This on the robbery case. And they used that case also as an aggravator to enhance, you know what I'm saying, my murder case, so I can get the death penalty.
So all of this is a little confusing, so I'm going to try and explain it for you. So Marcellus had been arrested for 2 robberies. One he says that he did commit, he was guilty of, and he'd been sentenced to...
Indy, speaking of that, did you see all of the executions that are set to happen in the next few days in multiple different states? September and October, the next few weeks, there are so many people set to be executed. I'm not sure why there's such a cluster right now, or if they finally were able to get them. I'm not sure, but it's concerning to say the least.
20 years for. The other robbery involved 3 men with guns and ski masks. There was video footage of the crime, but all 3 men were wearing ski masks, as mentioned, and gloves. Essentially, they're completely covered from head to toe. However, police would use Marcellus's former partner to point him out in the footage and say that she believed that he was in fact one of those men. Marcellus says that he knew a couple of guys from the restaurant who told police that they knew him and did not believe him to be any one of the people that robbed the restaurant. Marcellus says that police show them a picture of him and just say, "But you know this guy, right?" "Well, yes, we do," they say. "Well, just sign it to say that you know him." At court, the prosecution say, "So you're saying you don't believe Marcellus was the one who committed the crime, yet you signed this picture to say that it was him?" But why go to all this effort to convict him of the second robbery? Well, Marcellus says that he believes it's so that he could be eligible for the death penalty for the murder the police were now saying he committed. How does this work? Well, if a weapon is used in the commission of a robbery, the charge becomes aggravated robbery, which carries with it a much harsher sentence because it is a much more serious crime, and would mean that Marcellus was eligible for the death penalty in this murder charge. In Missouri, there are a number of ways in which you can be eligible for the death penalty. In fact, 17. With Marcellus's background, although extensive, he would not have in fact been eligible under any of these 17 reasons for the death penalty. However, the law states that first-degree murder is punishable by death when the offence was committed by a person with a prior record or conviction for murder, not Marcellus, or the offence was committed by a person who has one or more serious assaultive criminal convictions. So with Marcellus being found guilty of aggravated robbery, that now makes him eligible for the death penalty. Lara Azario had also told police that Marcellus confessed to her about the crime and apparently provided details about the case that had not been made public. So let's take a look at this statement made by Marcellus's former partner. She tells police that Marcellus had said that he'd broken into the home but had been surprised by the fact that Felicia was in the home. She got out of the shower, come downstairs, and that is when Marcellus killed her.
Y'all, I think there's just some misunderstandings in the chat. I know people are this is a very heavy topic, so please just do your best to stay respectful. Everybody's fine. I think there's just some misunderstandings. Thank you.
She says Marcellus told her that Felicia fought for her life and had scratched him multiple times. She had in fact seen visual scratches on him. Felicia's fingernails had been swabbed and clipped. They had in fact found some skin and fibres under her fingernails, which was tested. However, the tests come back and they do not match Marcellus Williams. The strongest evidence against Marcellus would be what she tells police next. She says that she saw some of Felicia's property inside the trunk of Marcellus's car, including the missing laptop, and that in fact Marcellus had sold it to a man named Glenn Roberts a few days after the murder. She told police that if they looked in his car, they would find property belonging to the victim. So, police do, and indeed would find items that had been taken from Felicia Gale's home. Now, that to anyone listening would sound highly suspicious. And in fact, that was all the evidence the police now needed to formally charge Marcellus for the murder of Felicia Gale. And he was set to be tried and could face the death penalty. We've obviously got, a public defender trying to help you with that case.
If you charge with a potential death penalty case, you get two attorneys.
Right.
So I had two. They wasn't public defenders. I had two private attorneys that was paid by the state, so you might well still say they was public defenders, but they really wasn't. They was private attorneys, but they was appointed by the state, the court. You know what I mean?
Did you remember your first discussion with those attorneys about this particular case and what was discussed?
First discussion with them, I can't remember the first discussion. Of course, generally, if I can just speak generally, it's going to be about, of course, I had nothing to do with this, and about what kind of preparations they was making in regards to preparing to, combat this stuff. You know what I mean? Once I was seeing different police reports, and I was like, hold up, this police report is saying this, and I was trying to point out different things to them to show that, hey, you know what I'm saying, this doesn't even make any sense. Look at this, you know what I'm saying?
You have 1 minute remaining.
And that's all we have time for.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the second. So this is a 2-part series. Again, I will continue to drop the link in the chat of this channel. There is a lot of, you can go look on any platform. There's a lot of information. The Innocence Project, the link was dropped above. Chico's dropping another documentary that talks about Missouri. Y'all, this is intense, and it's a very heavy topic, but it really needs to be discussed, and I couldn't be silent on this.
Hello, and welcome back to 1 Minute Remaining. My name is Jack Lawrence, the host and creator of this show. Today is part 2, and the final part for now, of the story of Marcellus Williams, a man who has been sentenced to death by the state of Missouri for the 1998 murder of 42-year-old Felicia Gale.
For anybody that is coming in, we are within about an hour and a half of his scheduled execution in the state of Missouri.
It's a crime that he has not only always maintained he's innocent of, but one that DNA evidence says that he didn't commit. In our previous episode, police had got what they believed to be enough evidence in which to formally charge Marcellus with the murder. They turn up to prison, where he's serving time for a separate incident, and tell him that he's being charged with the murder of Felicia Gale. Obviously, when they first came to you about this crime, it was almost a year after it had happened. So I'm assuming you had no way of knowing where you were when this actual crime took place.
Well, I know that I was over my grandfather's house, this summertime, with my little cousins, you know what I'm saying? I believe my son, I was keeping my son during that time. I think they was on summer vacation.
Yeah.
And my son, he was like,
if the United States Supreme Court doesn't come back with anything and stops this, his son, unfortunately, is set to be at his execution. I want you to take that into account. And I also want to remind everybody that's coming in late to this too, the victim's family doesn't support him being executed. They are against him being executed.
Like going on 8 years old, but he's always been big for his age. But yeah, and I mean, my little cousins are probably at that time was about 9, something like around that time, about around that age, something like that. But yeah, I remember being at my grandfather's house.
So the prosecution, as we know, have 2 witnesses, questionable witnesses, but witnesses nonetheless. One being Henry Cole, a distant relative of Marcellus's, who was incarcerated with him for a while. He tells police that Marcellus confessed to him that he had committed the murder. Then there's a former partner of Marcellus's called Lara Azzaro. She tells detectives that he had also admitted to the crime to her, and she in fact directed police to some of the victim's missing belongings, one of which was a laptop that she said that Marcellus had sold just after the murder. So what sort of case were the attorneys trying to build in your defense? What were they bringing to the table to try and combat this?
Nothing for real. They, right now, these 2 attorneys, Joseph Green and Christopher McGraw, both of them, they are judges now. Right now today, they are both judges.
Yeah.
And they it wasn't no comeback. And one of them was Christopher McGraw. He kept almost to the point where he was arguing with me, trying to get me to withdraw my speedy trial motion, because at one point they couldn't keep up with Henry Cole and they couldn't find him. You know what I'm saying? He was like disappearing on them. The prosecutor was giving him money and coming to find out and doing this and doing that for him. And he was going to New York and all these type of things. And they wanted you know, that I'm talking about Christian McGraw was trying his best to get me to withdraw my speedy trial motion. You know what I'm saying? I was putting pressure on the state to come on with it. You know what I mean? So yeah, eventually I actually withdrew my motion for speedy trial, which I should have never did that. You know what I'm saying? But I live and learn. You know.
So what Marcellus is saying here is that he'd requested a speedy trial. This, in fact, makes up one of the 27 amendments in the United States Constitution. In fact, it sits at number 6 and states, "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favour, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defence." In English, that simply means if a defendant announces that he is ready for trial and files a request for a speedy trial, then the court shall set the case for trial as soon as reasonably possible thereafter. So the advantages to having a speedy trial are quite a few. You can obviously recall events a lot easier, as can your witnesses. It allows your attorney to compile recent evidence. Everything's just fresher, as opposed to waiting years to going to trial and memories becoming faded and possibly evidence getting lost, as we'll hear very soon. And possibly the biggest advantage is that it gives the prosecution less time to prepare.
Sorry if you heard some noise in the background. I was pulling up another video to show you guys.
What Marcellus is saying is that the prosecution were, in fact, at one point having issues with one of their key witnesses. It would appear Mr. Cole was giving them a bit of a runaround. And had Marcellus not waived his right to that speedy trial, as his attorney had said he should, then there is every possibility one of the state's key witnesses may not have made it to testify. So it was off to trial. And like with all trials in the US, the first port of call is jury selection. I mean, would you consider the jury that presided over your case, would you call them a jury of your peers?
No way.
12 jurors are selected randomly from the jury pool, a list of potential jurors compiled from voter registration records of people living in the federal district. When selecting the jury, the prosecutor and defense attorney may not discriminate against any group of people. For example, the judge will not allow them to select only men or only women. A jury should represent all types of people, races and cultures. Both lawyers are allowed to ask questions about their potential biases and may excuse jurors from service. Each side is allowed to excuse certain potential jurors without providing a reason by using a limited number of preemptory challenges. The prosecution in this case would remove a total of 6 jurors. And what one thing do you think all these jurors had in common?
Anybody have a guess in the chat? What do you think all 6 of those potential jurors had in common? Some of you already know. Thank you, Peanut Shell. I can't take credit for this. This 1 minute remaining who did these 2 segments did an incredible job laying this out. But thank you for joining us. I just wanted to bring some attention to this because it's just sat so heavy on my chest.
I'll give you one guess. Yes, that's right. They were all African Americans, and this left just 1 black jury member among 11 whites.
Take that into thought for a moment. Yep. The jury was made up of 11 white folks and 1 African American.
You know what I'm saying? I had 1 black person on my jury, And the rest of them, when they were white women and white men, all of them was older than me. You know what I'm saying? I'm like 20, probably about, I'm still in my, well, at that time, I'm like, I'm probably 31 at that time. Every single person on my jury was older than me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And even the one black guy, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, there's no way those jurors were my peers at all, period. That's just something that they say. That only applies, and that really only applies to, you know what I'm saying, people who are the Caucasian and the whites, you know what I'm saying? That applies to them because, that don't apply to black people or Hispanics or anybody like that, or other non-white people in the United States. That's a reality.
So the trial is underway, and the prosecution have their two key witnesses. Let's look at these two witnesses who seem to have some pretty damning evidence to suggest that Marcellus could be guilty of this crime. Firstly, there's Henry Cole. Now, it's important to know that at the time of his testimony to police, he himself was facing some more hefty charges and more prison time. So, with a little help from police on these charges and the promise of some easy money, it seemed he was only too happy to help. In fact, he almost says as much while on the stand, as he admits he would never have come forward had it not been for the reward money that was offered. What the court would never find out is that his own family had written sworn affidavits that he had in fact bragged about the fact he had set this all up and that he was about to make a ton of money claiming the reward. His own son also wrote an affidavit to state that his father told him he had a caper going on and something big was coming his way. Not only this, but he said his father had made many false allegations against other people and had been doing it for decades. Other inmates that were in prison at the time of all of this happening had also given sworn affidavits that they were approached by detectives and others to see if they would corroborate Henry's story and also say that Marcellus had confessed to the crime. But they all refused to do so. Then we have Marcellus's former girlfriend. She was facing
Doesn't that sound a little fishy to anybody else?
numerous charges for solicitation as she was working as a prostitute at the time. And just like Henry Cole, there were affidavits written against her by two of her friends, Edward Hobson and Colleen Bailey. They had both stated that Asaro admitted that she set up Marcellus to get the reward money to feed her cocaine habit. They also said that she was a known police informant who was always lying and informing on others to get herself out of trouble, and she'd been doing it for years. What about the evidence from the crime scene itself? Well, as we know, there were bloody shoe prints that were found. These not only did not match the shoes Marcellus was wearing when he was arrested. Fair enough, you could say, well, he might have been wearing a different pair of shoes. Well, he may have been, but this doesn't mean anything because the size of the print did not match Marcellus at all. So that's out the window. Then there were the hair samples found at the crime scene, both pubic and head hair. They were tested and not only came back as not a match for the victim or her husband, but no, they were also not a match for Marcellus Williams. What about the fingerprints? Fingerprint evidence spread across the crime scene, bloody fingerprints everywhere. That has to be one of the biggest pieces of evidence that they have. Well, the police stated that none of the fingerprints were of good enough quality to be able to make a decent match. And then something weird happens. The fingerprints disappear before the defense team is able to have them looked at by their own expert.
The fingerprints disappear and the DNA evidence from the knife was contaminated.
You know, the whole way through this trial, obviously you knew the possibility of the outcome of this, but were you confident that you would be found not guilty because of the lack of evidence?
No. When I started seeing different things that was going against me and how the judge was reacting and making rulings against the attorneys and what the prosecutor was doing and stuff like that, and I seen all the different stuff that was going on, I was like, they trying to, put this on me. So I was like, it's a possibility that I will, be found guilty, irregardless, So yeah, because my attorneys didn't attack the DNA, they didn't attack none of the evidence, like the handling of like the shoe print and all that stuff disappearing and all this stuff, So I was like, yeah. So I was just preparing myself for that, you know. And then I know I wasn't up under no preconceived notions of who I was dealing with. I know who I'm dealing with, and I know the history, you know what I'm saying, of the United States judicial system. You know what I mean?
Marcellus's defense attorneys would focus on the fact that none of the evidence found at the scene linked Marcellus to it in any way.
You can also, if you're interested in some of the appeals and things that have been sent, there are a bunch of the documents publicly available in this case if you're interested in reading the court documents. Y'all, I'm going to get through a few more minutes of this, and then I'm going to leave you. We're an hour and 18 minutes from his scheduled execution, and hearing this, if you take one thing away from this story in general, our justice system is fucked. We are innocent. We are executing innocent people. This shouldn't be happening. Marcellus, there is so many questions that should have been asked. There's so many things that should have been done. There's so many blaring problems in this case, and the governor refuses to stay his execution. The Missouri Supreme Court refuses to intervene. Why? And this is why it's so important to stick to the facts, because unfortunately, people get railroaded by the system still to this day. And an innocent man is about to lose his life.
The hairs found, no match, bloody footprint.
And even if you don't believe he's innocent, there's enough questions that you should be asking, that he should get a fair trial. He should have a jury of his peers.
It's no match. The blood and skin found under Felicia's nails, not a match. Fingerprints, well, of course, we'll never know. But we still, of course, have the issue of the laptop and the items that were found in Marcellus's car. Well, the person who bought the laptop, Glenn Roberts, was brought to trial to testify. And he indeed got up on the stand and said that, yes, he was sold the laptop by Marcellus Williams. He would also go on to say Marcellus stated when selling the laptop to him that he'd got it from his girlfriend, Lara Azaro. However, the jury would never hear this part of Mr. Roberts' testimony. Why? The judge would not allow them to hear it, citing the hearsay ruling. So the trial lasts for 2 weeks.
A little over 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks, a little bit over 2 weeks. I would say close to 20 days, possibly.
And do you remember how long the jury took to deliberate?
They didn't take no time. I think they took maybe a couple of hours, I would say. Jury was all the way against me. You know what I'm saying? They was like, at one, when they was being questioned, some of them, they was like, you know, why even having a trial? It's like, basically, what sentence to get? I remember one of the doing the voir dire, I remember one of them saying that, you know, but I don't think that person stayed on the jury, but still they influencing the other jurors when they hear stuff like this, you know?
The governor, okay, I'm gonna let you guys go over and finish. Let's watch just a couple more minutes so you can hear a few more, and then I'm gonna close out with current interviews from today, and I'm gonna check for an update on the Supreme Court.
So, on the basis of testimony from two witnesses, whose testimony, might I add, was significantly different and didn't match the crime scene evidence, the jury returned the verdict of guilty, and Marcellus Williams is sentenced to death. So after they find you guilty, what's going through your mind after that?
Just fight, you know what I'm saying? Just don't give up, you know what I'm saying? Keep doing what you can. And I end up going to, of course, I was already in prison, you know, since I ended up going back and had to come to Potosi because that's where they house the death row inmates at. So I was at MSP at first in 2001. Once I got found guilty, you know, at that time I already had a typewriter. I was doing a lot of my pretrial motions on my own. because I was fighting the 2 robbery cases, and now I got to fight this murder case. At that time, I didn't know on appeal that you get 2 attorneys, even on your appeal process, doing the murder, doing the death penalty case. I didn't know that then. I found that out later. But still, during that time, I still was doing what I could to help my attorneys on appeal and things like that. And I had opposition even in that. You know what I'm saying? I had to, combat attorneys, even on the appeal process. You know what I mean? My mind was to fight. I wasn't, everybody looking at me, pointing the finger at me or whatever. But I still, was focused. I never, gave up, even to now. This is my 3rd execution date, and I'm still, focused on, doing whatever I can and use as a means I can to, fight this situation.
Marcellus is shipped from his current prison to Potosi Correctional Center. It's a Missouri Department of Correction prison located in the unincorporated Washington County, Missouri. The facility currently houses 800 death.
I'm not seeing an update from the Supreme Court yet. There is a bunch of protests going on. I'm going to switch gears here. If you want to go watch that again, that is 1 minute remaining. Incredible channel. Great stories. And I hate saying great, very well done content on horrific situations. I'm going to switch to News Nation this is from earlier.
If you want to record, go ahead. Take the recorder out. Let's do this. Let's do it. Don't like that. Give me one. No, Mama. Let me do it.
Okay, so what was she referring to? Let me do it. Let me do it.
Well, the beginning of that phone call, when I answered the phone when she called, I didn't know who it was. So I was trying to get to my recorder. That's why you heard her say, yes, get your recorder. Let's do this. Because the initial part of that phone call said, at that time, my name was Smith. Miss Smith, is it too late? Is it too late? Is he dead? Did they kill him already? Is he dead yet? I got something I want to say. And so at that point I said, can I record you? And she said, yes, get your recorder. Let's do this. So I can, from what she said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the question becomes, and thank you for telling us about it, Allison, obviously in reading through the rulings, that's not good enough. The court and the governor both say, no, we don't know that she didn't do it, and it's not competent evidence, and we've done enough of this. What do you feel about that reckoning?
I feel that is exactly reflective of what's wrong with our justice system today. Why are they in a rush to execute somebody? There's so much evidence pointing towards his innocence that just literally pushing the execution back 3 weeks to hear this new evidence, once he's gone, you can't bring him back. Why not just delay the execution and hear all these points?
They say 15.
You can go watch this full segment. I encourage you to. It goes on to talk about what that call was.
Times he's tried to do this, and that this, both of these people, the man who's now deceased, who was one of the prison informants who supposedly wanted to recant but never did, and now her, who supposedly wants to recant but never officially did, they say that's not enough.
Well, hearsay does count in the state of Missouri. It actually freed Kevin Strickland last year. Latara, if you want to elaborate on that.
Well, yes, I do know that Kevin Strickland, there were witnesses in his case, and, they were allowed to say what the witness in Kevin Strickland said. So I'm not understanding. And I don't think this has never been presented to the court. So let me clear this up. But I don't understand why come is something that the courts would not consider. Because it most definitely, you could tell she was most definitely getting ready to say something that was against her self-interest. And that is exactly how the state of Missouri, how they were able to answer and do what they did in Kevin Strickland's case.
The prosecution is standing next to. Oh, there's an update. Is that an update? Hold on. Let me read through this.
All right. So one last question, Allison.
Yes.
And how terrible is this that we're having this conversation and literally this man may be gone tomorrow, and
It's
we may not know
2024.
what the truth of it is. I mean, what a crazy time.
It is a
but
modern day
Allison,
lynching. Yeah.
Well, look, I understand your perspective on it. The counter is, well, but we have a system and there's been so much due process here that he's had more than enough time for this.
She said it's a modern day lynching.
But what does it mean to you that, like, how do you deal with this? That tomorrow he's going to be gone?
And this was yesterday.
Not good. We went through this a few years ago, and
They just put it to their YouTube channel today.
praying we have the same outcome at the 25th hour. We got the stay of execution, and I'm really holding strong that we're going to again. I mean, there's so many things, and I know we don't have time, but like the knife was contaminated by the state. Like, right, for that reason, there should be a mistrial or a retrial. They literally contaminated the evidence, the state of Missouri, that could have exonerated him. How is that fair that he's punished for their own people ruining the investigation?
What does it mean that the Innocence Project, so the Innocence Project has picked up the representation, everybody knows who they are. And
Yeah, of course.
I just saw that chasing. I'm almost speechless right now.
they are not advancing this argument that this caller was going to recant. Why not?
I personally believe, and I'm a huge fan of the Innocence Project, they do great work. I know they really focus on DNA, and they have presented.
I think with that, they denied the stay. Yeah, I don't know how that works where the governor denied it yesterday. If he could come back and change his decision today, I'm not sure how that works. I'm speechless. You guys heard just a bit of the story. I mean, there's a lot more to it. But the state of Missouri is set to execute potentially an innocent man that didn't get a fair trial, no matter what you think. A man that witnesses were problematic. In my opinion, an innocent man in an hour and 6 minutes. Please remember Marcellus's name. Please remember the victim's family. They don't want this man executed. And unfortunately, Marcellus isn't the only innocent man that will have been executed in the United States. This happens way too often. And this is why it is so fucking important to talk about these situations, to talk about how corrupt our justice system is. These are human beings. We have to do better. And I am going to end it because I'm not going to be able to keep myself together. This one hit me. All of them do, but this one is just like, there's so many questions. I don't know how this governor, and I mean, I do, unfortunately, I do. If you're the praying type, send prayers for his son and his family and his loved ones, the victim's family, because they're being denied justice of finding out who took the life of their loved one. And if there's any, I don't think there's anything that can happen from what I've read. I don't think there's anything that can overrule this at this point. Shaby, I don't know. I don't know how they do. Chasing, the name sounds familiar, but I can't remember. The name sounds really familiar, but I cannot remember the story. Yeah. Marcellus. Yeah. Marcellus the family, the victim's family, I'm sorry, because they're being denied justice too. Anywho, we got to do better. We've got to do better. This is why it's so fucking infuriating that people like Dog the Bounty Hunter come out on a case that they don't even know shit about. And let me say this again, and talk about the death penalty, how Tennessee has the death penalty, where we are faced with executing an innocent man tonight. This is why it's so important that people have ethics in their reporting of these people's tragedies. Remember, we vote these people in. We got to do better. And to everybody that this is hitting hard, sending you big hugs. Yeah, that Chasey and I just kept playing that over and over again last night in my head, listening to this. I'm scared. Like, I just don't know how, like, this is even, like, give the man a fair trial. He signed an Elford plea that he will stay in prison for the rest of his life, and they denied it. Sorry, hold on. They're not even answering the phone. They haven't been answering the phone all day. His DNA was on the knife. The knife was contaminated. So how do you explain the DNA under her fingernails that didn't match his, the footprints that didn't match his? How do you explain all that? I mean, seriously, the man deserves a fair trial at least. But here we are. Yeah, the reality of this shit. Yeah, it's 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so it's almost 5 p.m. Central Time, so within an hour. Yeah, MK, it should be. Thank you. That it should be. This should be fucking alarming. This could be any one of your loved ones. Anyone. This could be. There's a reason why we have innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. When you have corrupt witnesses, corruption, people, all of that stuff, there's a problem. There's a fucking problem. And I encourage you to go look and see how many people are being executed. In fact, hold on. Let's do that as a group. Let's go look at that for some of you that think this is okay and obviously have lost touch with reality. Maybe never had it to begin with. Go over here. Okay, so let's go down to where we have a bunch scheduled. Oops, maybe I got the wrong page. Hold on. All right, I want you to take a look at that map. September 24th, Travis James Mullis, Texas. That one's a horrific crime. I did look into that. Marcellus Williams, September 24th. Alan Miller, September 26th, Alabama. September 26th, Oklahoma. Emmanuel Littlejohn, October 1st. Garcia White, Texas. October 17th, Robert Robertson III in Texas. October 17th, Alabama, Derek Dearman. November 21st, Carrie Dale Grayson. November 29th, Marion Bowman, South Carolina. December 3rd, Missouri, Christopher Leroy Collins. Dexter, come on. December 18th, Indiana, Joseph Cochran. These are still, why is there so many right here over the next couple weeks? Oh, Oh, wait, it's an election year. It's a fucking election year. Dexter wants treats. Look at that. You see a problem? I sure do. All right. Now I'm out. I want to leave you with that. That's what we are doing in the United States. And Missouri, Donna, Missouri, I encourage you all to go think about Marcellus's family. Think about the victim's family today, because they're being denied justice too. And with that, I hope y'all have the best night you possibly can, but keep these people in your thoughts. Bye, y'all.